Numbers 13. It's a story of the 12 spies that went out into the land. And if I were really mean, I should have somebody read this because of all the names. Beginning in verse 5. We'll just glance at this, and I'm going to pull this out in sections. Here at the beginning, and it says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Send thou men." We put this on King James. Norm. The Lord said to Moses, "Send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders." So at the Lord's command, Moses sent them out from the desert of Paran. All of them were leaders of the Israelites. These are their names, and I'm not going to read them. I'm just going to point out something here. If you look at those names, you have Shaphat, Caleb, Igal, and so on. In that whole list, there's only 2 names in there that you see today. You're going to see Joshua, which one here isn't. It's Hosea, Hoshea, son of Nun. Moses also changed his name to Joshua, and Caleb. All those other names, I defy any of you to say, "Oh, I've got a friend whose name is Igal or Palti or any of the other ones." I don't know why nobody names their kids that, unless it has something to do with the fact that, well, they were one of the 12 that were disobedient to God, so therefore I don't want my kid being raised up with that kind of a cloud over me. But I thought it was interesting that only those 2 you even hear people name their kids. So just as a thought provoker, a little background information to start. Most of you are familiar with the Star Wars movies. Is there anybody who hasn't really watched? Oh, you did watch the Star Wars. We bought the actual set, and I made Nora watch all of them. 2 characters in there, 2 little robots. What were their names? R2-D2 and C3PO. I'm sorry, what can you tell me about those 2 characters? They were characters. They had personalities.
Were they both robots?
They were both. Well, one was an android. One was a robot. R2-D2 was the robot. R2-D2 was a little walking trash can. R2-D2 was the one who always found something good. He was always positive. He would always want to help. He would always be around. He would go there. He would anticipate problems. Right? What was C3PO like?
Negative. He was like, "Oh, we're doomed all the time," and just not very helpful.
Yeah, he was. He was the opposite. He was the one that could find a problem in every solution. He was the one who was always not wanting to jump into the fray. There was no hope. Everything was going to be lost, and so on. In the church, we have people like that. We have like R2-D2 always wanted to go and be part of it and help. We call them the goers. They're the ones that are ready to go and do and serve, and they're going to go out there. Then we have the woers. Like, whoa, that's the kind of, the other ones are going to say, well, maybe we'll stop to think about this. Maybe this isn't so good. And they're the grumblers. And so we're going to be looking at these men in this light of the goers and the woers, as it were. So we have all these men that were sent out. Did anything stand out to you in that first 3 verses that I read? Actually, even the first 2. What did the Lord say to Moses? He said, send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. Who's sending them in? God, right? Okay. Somebody turn to Deuteronomy 1:22.
Deuteronomy 1.
Verse 22. What's that verse say?
Then all of you came to me and said, let us send men ahead to spy out the land for us and bring back a report about the routes we are to take and the towns we will come to.
Okay. So the men said, Moses is saying this, and every one of you came to me and said, let's go do this. So apparently, the people came to him and said, we want to go explore. Moses went to God and said, this is what they want to do. So it was their idea to go and do this. It wasn't like God said, here's a scary thing. How about if you all go do this? They originally said, we want to do this. And God said, okay, you go do it. But there's a key phrase in there that's going to play an important part in this. Send them into the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. God has that power. He was giving it to them. They didn't have to do anything. It was given to them. We're going to get back to this giving thing here in a minute. But let's go down to a little bit further after the names. In verse 17, he told them where to go, and he gave them the route. We're not going to read that whole route. And he asked them to find out what kind of land they're going to live in. Is it good or bad? What kind of towns? What kind of people? Is the soil fertile or poor? Are the trees in it? Or is it just like Lubbock? Do you do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land? Now, on this trip, I'm not an artist, so you have to imagine this. They started down to the very south of what is going to be called Canaan. And morning. And they started from the very south and they went up north. It took them 40 days It says at the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. It's 150 miles one way. So they went 150 miles north in like 2.5 weeks. And then they came back the other 150 miles in the next 2 weeks, roughly 2 weeks, 40 days. So we have all these men traveling through this area. We'll pick it up there in verse 26. They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. Here they reported to them and to the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is the fruit. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev, the Hittites, the Jebusites, and Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea and along Jordan. Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. R2D2. But the men who had grown up with him said, we can't attack these people. They are stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, the land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. What stands out there with their report to you? Fearful. A lot of fear. Those 10 men are fearful. Caleb said we can do it. Didn't say anything about Joshua yet. Anybody want to tell me who the descendants of Anak are? Who come from the Nephilim?
Goliath.
Goliath was a giant. Who are the Nephilim?
Was that when, and I may be like, sometimes I mix things up, but didn't angels come down and kind of like
Exactly.
had kids with the children on earth
That term actually refers to 4 different possible theories. We're not going to get into all 4. The most common that we tend to hear or talk about is this idea that there were fallen angels. Satan was an angel, one of the fallen angels who was sent to earth. These angels came to earth and mated with human women and had children. Now, one of the other translations of the 4 is just that they were fallen men. And so one elevates them to angel level, and because of their size and the angelic portion of it, their children were much larger, giants. Goliath was one of the descendants of these Anak. Another little piece of trivia. Anybody into the DC multiverse stuff? If you watch Big Bang, you are. Did Thor have an enemy named Anak? He did. And Anak was one who could lift the hammer. They were, so even in your comic books, even in that silliness of comic books, you can have allusions and reference. I'm always getting on the Nora. That's an allusion. Do you know what it's alluding to? No, but it was funny. So now you know when they talk about Anak in Thor.
You just make up a bunch of stuff.
That's the one thing that old men are allowed to do, make up stuff. Okay, so they're saying these people are so great, so big, just like Goliath, that these are giants and they're grasshoppers among the people. What was their mission? What were they told to do?
See what the land is like, whether the people live there are strong or weak, few or many, what kind of land do they live in, is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they walled or unwalled? How's the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees? And do your best to bring back fruit.
By the way, when they brought back the fruit, we're told that the fruit, they cut a bunch of grapes. They took one bunch of grapes, and that bunch of grapes was so large, and the grapes were so large, that they had to tie it to a stick and carry it between two men to bring it back. They just went softball-sized grapes. I mean, we're talking about something that's so big that two men had to carry it like that. So we're talking about a really good thing. But again, they were just told to look and to see and to observe what's there. Were they told to make a decision about whether or not they could possess it? Nope. Why not?
It had already been given to them.
It had already been given to them. God said, I'm giving you this land. Now, go see. And so all they had to do was just go and look. It's already been given to them. They could have come back and just reported what they have seen and ended it. But we have a tendency in our conversations in our world, and you can see it when you watch dialogue on TV and stuff, or listen to people talk. Inevitably, there's a but. There's always, what did I tell you to do? I told you to do X, Y, Z, but I did this instead. Can't tell you how many times I've told students in classrooms, I need you to do this. And there's always a but. So, let's continue to look at or talk about this a little bit. They were all negative. Does it seem like they had faith? This is where I get into what I said in my prayer. When you were little, one of your parents would say, come get in the car with me, we're going to go somewhere. Did you ever say, well, you might kill me. I might not get there. I remember our kids when we were swimming. I'd say, jump in the water to me. I don't know if you've ever been there. father's in the water, jump, I've got you. And what if you're smiling?
Like, are you sure you're gonna catch me?
Are you sure you're gonna catch it? I don't know. Jump off this diving board. Yes, you will go underwater, but this is how life works. You'll come back up.
You have the wind up. What do you do?
It's what?
What do you do under the water?
If there's no water? Well, then you don't jump. I mean, you have to have a little common sense. Okay. Because they didn't have faith, what were they really doing? What were they saying?
They didn't trust God.
They didn't trust God. Were they limiting God's power? They were. I mean, we see throughout the Bible, and Jesus says it many times, and we know that all things are possible with God. We know that His promises are trustworthy. We know that He is, if He says it, it's going to happen. Now, is it easier to be pessimistic or optimistic? It's easier to be pessimistic. What's that pessimism based on usually? Fear of the unknown? Fear of your capabilities to get it done? And that pessimism, in this case, caused grumbling. How would you define a grumbler? Here they were just kind of, well, we can't do it. It's just negative. What's a grumbler?
That's a lot of excuses. That's a lot of excuses.
A lot of excuses. Is it just the end of a report? Like, do you think we can do this? No. That may not be grumbling, that may just be an honest assessment of the situation. Grumbling entails more. Because even in this, it says, and they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They didn't just come in and say, hey, we can't do this. Or this is going to be really difficult. They broke up and they went out among the people, stirring up trouble, spreading that pessimism. Do you ever see that in the church? We do. I have a question. First of all, if you're doing it, what should you do? Not. What if you see somebody else doing it? What if he's always sitting in the office grumbling and complaining and things are so bad, things are so terrible, and things are and you know that, what should you do?
Based on the biblical text, you're supposed to confront Eden individually, and then if she doesn't listen, have other church members help you.
Okay? Go then with more than one person. What responsibility do the elders have?
To not be grumblers themselves, number one.
Oh, come
Well, these people had a history of I'm not taking up for them, but I'm just saying they had a history of grumbling. And in their minds, I think, and it would be in my mind, if God said, I'm going to give you the land, I would just expect to walk in and have a nice little farm and start raising chickens. And that isn't how it happened. He gave them the land, but there had to be some action on their part. And really throughout the Bible, that's what we're taught about us. God will give us many things, but he does not expect us just to stand still and wait for it to happen. He expects action on our part. And they did have to fight battles to go into the land. The key is when they went into the battle, did they believe they were going to win the battle? And they didn't. They were afraid and fearful, and there were so many unknowns. These were descendants of the people who were used to being told what to do every day from sun up to sundown because they were enslaved. And they have to think on their own. I just think this was all such a growing process, and grumbling was very easy.
And also, I had 2 points that you made. One, where had they been for the last 40 years?
Desert.
In the desert. And we'd probably grumble for 40 years in the desert as well, if I was just guessing. Number two, who guided their everyday thing while they were in the desert? They woke up in the morning, food was there for them, but they had rules.
Right.
They could only gather so much of it, and they couldn't keep it, and so on.
And it wasn't always just put in their tent. They had to go get it.
Yeah.
Therefore, they had to act.
They had to act. And so everything was laid out for them, but they also, he was trying to teach them that they had to do something for this stuff. Yes, he would take care of them, but they had to respond correctly. It's almost like being in prison. We hear stories of people being in prison for so long. When they come out, they can't handle freedom. They don't know what to do with it because their lives were so structured. And so that's kind of what we see here. In the 14th chapter, let's get into that just for a minute. Not only, here in the beginning of the 14th chapter, not only did those 10 men grumble and go out, but now we see at nighttime, all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, "If only we had died in Egypt or in the wilderness." Now, all they did was complain. Wouldn't it have been better? And it's easier to look back on it. It's always better. It was better to bear than what you're getting ready to have us do here. Again, some of the fear, some of the rejection of God, memories of the past tend to be on the better. They probably didn't think of the slaves. What they thought about was the fact that they had a house and they had food and it was constant and they were safe. Even though they were slaves, it was still a structured thing that they could rely on. Now, as we go through 14, and again, we don't have the time to read all of 14. Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb were among those who explored the land, tore their clothes, and said to the entire Israelite assembly, "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into the land, and he will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." And the assembly talked about stoning them. We have situations like that, not like that, but on a metaphorical level, I guess. We have situations at work or in the church where there are grumblers, people who are looking for the negative to complain about the thing, and they don't have the faith that they need. Now, on the rest of this story, the Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me in spite of all the signs I have performed among them? I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them, and I will make you into a nation greater and stronger than they. Moses pleads the case on behalf of the people, and the Lord replies to him, I have forgiven them as you have asked. Nevertheless, as surely as I live and as surely as the glory of the Lord fills the whole earth, not one of those who saw my glory and the signs I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times, not one of them will ever see the land I promised an oath to their ancestors. No one who has treated me with contempt will ever see it. And the Lord still talks to Moses and Aaron and says, how long will this wicked community grumble against me? I have heard the complaints of these grumbling Israelites. So tell them, as surely as I live, in this wilderness your bodies will fall, every one of you 20 years or old or more who is counted in this sentence, who has grumbled against me. Not one of you will enter the land I swore with uplifted hand to make it home, except Caleb and Joshua. So, and he tells what's going to happen to them. So they can wind up going back in the desert a second time. This is where we always kid about this. Sometimes in elders meetings, I'll even make comments like this. Say, we need to be doing something. We need to be trusting that God will let us do this. Where's our faith? We need to do this. And someone will say, yeah, but and I'll say, okay. Remember in the Bible where all those people who were born 18 years and younger, who were born, walked around the desert for the next 40 years saying, come on, hurry up, die already so we can get into the promised land. You know, they knew why they were there, and they knew it was these older people that stood in their way. And I'm saying, we got younger people who are thinking that we're standing in their way. We need to do something here. But we have grumblers, and I grumble. Nora wants me to do things all the time when I grumble, right? Grumbling is just a real easy thing to do. You have grumblers at work?
That's right. They're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
Are you?
Sometimes.
So, considering that these grumblers exist, about 4 minutes, toward the end, when we get down to verse 36 in that chapter. So the men Moses had sent to explore the land, who returned and made the whole community grumble against him by spreading a bad report about it. These men who were responsible for spreading the bad report about the land were struck down and died of a plague before the Lord. That happened like immediately. Those 10 men, just God made sure they weren't going to grumble anymore. And those people that listened to them were the ones who were affected by it for a long time. And in 39, when Moses reported this to all the Israelites, they mourned bitterly. Early the next morning, they set out for the highest point of the hill country, saying, now we are ready to go up to the land the Lord promised. Surely we have sinned. And Moses said, but why are you disobeying the Lord's command? This will not succeed. And you can read this here. They initially grumbled and said, this won't work, we can't do this. And then when they saw somebody was punished for it, they went, oh, we've sinned. Now, let's go up and do it. Now, once again, what are they doing? They're disobeying God. They're wanting to do it their way. They had their thought about what should happen to begin with, rather than having God's thought about what should happen. Now, they recognize their sin, but they still want to do it opposite to what God wants them to do. They still will not listen to God. And at the end of this, we say, nevertheless, in their presumption, they went up toward the highest point of the hill, though neither Moses nor the ark of the Lord's covenant moved from the camp. Then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who lived in the hill country came down and attacked them and beat them down all the way to Hormah. So they had the land that was promised to them taken away because all they did was grumble and complain. Now, when we talk about grumbling today, we've been talking about it in business and life and stuff like that. How do we grumble against God's will, His command? You may not even know that you do it. What do we do in our lives on a biblical, theological level?
I think that was fascinating when he said the bad report spread like wildfire. And it was like what Nora was talking about. I mean, to me, it's like the bad report was obviously some information about what's going on, but it was the fearful part of the information. And then you see on, and they keep going, and it gets even further. That one time they say, let's find a leader that'll take us back to Egypt. Let's vote someone in. Let's go get somebody. And it gets worse and worse. And it's like out of control. And then they get in front of Moses and Aaron, and then they're even worse. They're like, take us back to Egypt. We should have died in the wilderness. Like, they just like, this is horrible. But I think it starts with that little bit of that bad information. So then I think to myself, the question you asked, where's the source of my information? And then that source of information, what do I believe that is true? How do I fact check it, kind of like we do today? So if I'm not in this, then I feel like that bad report would seem to be something I might go along with. If I didn't have the true foundation of where that information or my faith came from, because then I would just go along with, Jared come to me and said, hey, guess what's going on in Green Lawn, bro? This is we got to do. Then I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, what's going, if I had this that they should have had, the faith, they wouldn't have believed that bad information, that small little, grumble or whatever it was. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. And I need to clarify something before you walk out of the room. I'm probably made it sound like the elders fight a lot and stuff like that. And I don't. When you have 15 or 20 men together, there's going to be disagreements on how you approach things. And so we may say something like, we just got this $40,000 donation. What should we do with it? And we discuss, well, Ken Stevenson's going to say, let's do missions. When Brent was in elder, he would say, it's got to be used, and so and I'm in charge of operations. I'm saying we really need an air conditioner. So, and we started arguing about stuff like that. And then we do, I shouldn't say argue in the literal sense of present opinions. We don't ever pull hair and fight and bite and stuff like that. So I want you to know that that's not an issue. There is grumbling. One of the things that we're talking about right now, two things. Number one is, what can we do to be the church that's like, say, the early church. I'll say the Acts 2 church, not the Acts 6 church, because by Acts 6, they had all the infighting and everything else. But the thing that we're getting ready to do is go into study, and we've had studies before. The elders on a regular basis sit down and study. What is it about this that we should be believing? Where is our faith coming from? And we do study. So I want to make sure that it's covered. Any other observations?
One more thing that just fascinates me is that today we act the same way as we did back then. God said, go take the land, but we said, let's hold on, let's go test the waters first. What is all that about? I'm thinking to myself, what do I test waters with in my life? God says, go do it. And I'm like, well, let me see let me go see what it's all about first. I don't know. That was one other observation that I took from the story.
Yeah, I mentioned last week that one of the things that we're talking about is we have a mission thing that's focused on discipling. And I have to be honest with you, I'm kind of an introvert. And when they say that we should be discipling all the time, wherever your feet are, you should be discipling. And that's hard for me. I remember Darryl Price going to Valero, and there was a trans person working there, and he just said, I want you to come to church. Do you have Jesus in your life? And he thought he was talking to this girl, and he wasn't. But it didn't stop him. I might walk up and say,
The pump's not working.
What?
The pump's not
The
working.
pump's not working. Or let me get some rice. I don't normally. How many of you normally say things to the grocery store checkout person, the person who you interact with at the gas station, or it's hard for us to do that. We separate things sometimes. I tend to think this, I'm walking around Lubbock Christian campus on a regular basis, and there's all kinds of people. And I tend to think in my mind, oh, well, they're all Church of Christ because they're at LCU. And it's not right. It's less than 50% of the people are Church of Christ. There's 50 some odd percent more that I could be talking to. But again, I let my fear of talking to people about it stop.
Well, you notice in that group of 10 men, only 2 said that they could defeat that group of people. So that took a lot of courage to stand up against the other 8 to say we can do it.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what you're describing. Is it's easy to fall into the group of 8. It's much easier than saying something.
Well, anyway, you can test me as we go through the next couple of years and say, have you changed? Are you discipling more? And I'm going to do what most people do, is say, we can build up disciples. That's part of it. Get disciples, build them up, glorify God. I'm going to focus on the building of disciples. I'll teach them. You go get them and bring them in. I'll teach them. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.